Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the Quest for 9 podcast brought to you by the Hoosier Network. I'm your host for today, Peter Miller. Alongside me, just the Nick Abel. Our good friend Owen Graham is on family duty, going to a wedding this weekend, so we wish him all the best there. But he's missing out on a good conversation.
Big one.
About Indiana men's soccer, the number 21st
in Top Drawer Soccer
ranked team in the country, picked up 2 big wins.
14 in the Coaches Bowl, so a little bit discrepancy there. We're not totally used to that. But yeah, you mentioned it, 2 big wins. That's the name of the game.
2 big wins. First coming against Ohio State in conference play. That was a 4-2 win here in Bloomington at Bill Armstrong Stadium. And a really complete performance from the Hoosiers. Had to come back a couple of times scored 3 unanswered goals to come away with the 4-2 win. Nick, thoughts on a big win over Ohio State?
Yeah, the Hoosiers had been sliding. Before that, we saw the uncharacteristic losses in October. Already have 3 losses in Big Ten play, and at that point, you really needed to pull away some points against a team that has severely underperformed in not just the Big Ten but the national rankings as well. Ohio State has been a shock to the collegiate soccer world. But Todd Yeagley's squad got it done. Not typical fashion, 4-2 victory, went down 2-1, and then they turned it on in the second half. Obviously, with the big help of Palmer Alt, who had what would be the game-winning goal. And then we saw that same script against Kentucky, a ranked team, this week as well. So you got to find ways to win the Big Ten matches, and that's what we haven't always seen, or at least pull away points, which is what we've talked about a lot. Those 3 losses could come to hurt you, as there's only 4 Big Ten matches to play. But, yeah, Ohio State was a pretty complete performance for the most part, especially that second half was where the Hoosiers put the pedal to the metal and no breathing room for the Buckeyes.
The Buckeyes did get that second goal, which I think jump-started Indiana a little bit in that second half. Got the 3 goals unanswered again. Alex Barger scored his 2nd of the year. Palmer Alt got his 9th. And Ben Doe scored his 1st of the season, which if Owen were here, he would, I'm sure, love to talk about. But, yeah, no, this was a win that you had to have for the Big Ten standings, as you mentioned, Nick. Things starting to separate a little bit as we get towards the end of regular season play here. Indiana sits alone in 6th place for the Big Ten. That's right behind a 3-way tie for 3rd, with 9 points, one behind the 3-way tie between Michigan, Rutgers, UCLA with 10. Washington in 2nd with 12, and the Maryland Terrapins up top with 14. So, despite the sort of break in conference play right now, if you're Indiana, you've got to win all these final games, regardless of if they're a conference game or not, Nick.
Yeah, and it was a big year. You started off the faux break of conference play, which is just the entirety of this week, off with a win against a ranked opponent in a rivalry match at Kentucky. They were 25 in both polls. They went down 1-0 off of just a phenomenal finish. And then Palmer Alt said, I'm going to do what I do best. Finished off a penalty, and then an absolute banger with the outside foot in that second half. And the Hoosiers gritted out a win, kind of a lot of what we saw early season against those good teams had to come from behind. I mean, if the Hoosiers didn't have to play in the Big Ten and just played ranked opponents outside of the conference, they might just be the best team in the country. They're 3-0-1 against ranked teams outside of the Big Ten, and outside of the Big Ten in a whole, 6-0-1. So that's the conference play is never easy, and that kind of shows you the depth of the Big Ten this season. But it's just a testament to how Todd Yeagley's squad has been prepared for the non-conference games against even the best opponents they're going to face on the road.
You mentioned that unbeaten record against ranked opponents this season. I think that is so important when you start to look at the big picture and you start to think postseason for Indiana, because maybe they've struggled with conference opponents, but they're beating the good teams.
Yeah.
And not only does that show the coaching experience that Todd Yeagley has, it shows the ability, skill, and experience of this squad as well. Plenty of players who know how to win those kinds of games. As we've discussed, they've been doing it all year long. So as long as you're not slipping up in those games that you should be winning, then things are looking pretty good for Indiana to be one of those contenders as we get into December. But you mentioned Kentucky. Another game that's kind of started off a little cagey, a little sort of boring. Kentucky got the opener to kind of jumpstart that game a little bit. And just a complete second half from the Hoosiers. You saw the fight. And I think there's no better example of that than the penalty. Doing whatever necessary to get a chance to just get back in the match, set up your top goal scorer and Mac Herman Award or Mac Herman Trophy player to watch.
And he's going to be in that conversation the entire season.
Absolutely.
There's a decent chance he makes his way to St. Louis for that trophy presentation when everything's said and done, because he's been phenomenal for this Hoosiers team.
11 goals on the season for Palmer Alt after the brace against Kentucky to pick up a big win. And really, I think one of the other main talking points for this game that I found is interesting is the changing goalkeeper.
Yes.
Judwell and Michelle got his second start of the season, first since the season opener against Clemson, which was also a ranked matchup. So, Nick, what do you think Todd Yeagley's seeing in this young freshman that's giving him the trust in these big games?
I'm surprised that he made the move. We really thought that Holden Brown had kind of won what was a 50-50 goalkeeping battle, as Todd Yeagley described it at the beginning of the season. He played pretty adequately in net for a lot of the year. Not a ton of goals were his fault. I think the one thing that Yeagley probably liked, and he especially liked what he saw against Kentucky, was the ability and the size, decisiveness on some of those balls into the middle, those crosses, those set pieces, those corners. You saw a couple very, very clean punch-outs by Jewel and Michelle in that Kentucky game, and I thought Indiana as a whole defended set pieces a lot better than they have in some of those losses where you saw set pieces were a problem. So I think that is something to keep in mind. But now it's going to be something to look at going forward with just 5 matches left in the season. How does he decide who he's going to have in net come postseason play? Because a good goalkeeping performance versus a bad one could be the difference of winning not only a match, but keeping your season alive, and a hot goalie could potentially even mean a national championship. So it's going to be important for him to focus on that. And I think this Hanover match will probably be one where we see both guys in net just because it's a D3 opponent. But once you turn the page and look for those last 4 Big Ten matches, whoever's on the starting sheet in the cage is going to be a huge storyline.
Yeah. The interesting thing for Todd Yeagley is going to be whether he wants to go for experience or maybe a little bit more confidence in Judwell and Michelle, because as you mentioned, the ability in the air, that's so important, especially in those postseason games where goals are at a premium. And if you're a team who's a goal down, you're going to be throwing a lot of balls in the box, just hoping to get the right bounce, hoping get something on net and over the goal line. So having a big body like that to command the aerial battle is certainly an advantage that plays into Michelle's favor. But then again, there's Holden Brown, who's the much older, much more experienced, coming from Virginia, another very, very good soccer program over there. But as you mentioned, this Hanover match is going to be a good opportunity to maybe reevaluate a little bit and see what you have in each guy, who does what best, who really will fit your lineup best as you go through Big Ten play. It seems like so far Todd Yeagley has favored Holden Brown there, but does Jadwell and Michelle get a shout? Wouldn't surprise me. I think another interesting thing, too, is before we get to Hanover, it had been almost a month since September 23rd that Indiana had held an opponent to 1 goal or to less than 1 goal. That was a 1-0 loss to Michigan State. So Holden Brown, yeah, some of those goals that he'd given up, not necessarily his fault, some defensive lapses, miscommunications, stuff like that. But it makes you wonder if Todd Yeagley maybe just wants to try something new and see what happens. We talked a little bit about it last week with maybe the defensive back line, changing some guys up, changing the lineup a little bit, getting Victor Akum more involved could potentially help settle things down. But it seems that making a change in net has aided that as well. So we'll see what he does to start against Hanover and as that game goes along. And you mentioned it, Nick, Hanover College, a Division III opponent, but absolutely no pushover at all.
We were impressed when we looked at some of the things they had done. 10-2-2 on the season. This is their only D1 opponent, but they've got another guy that you're going to have to know where he's at all times, which sometimes against a D3 opponent isn't necessarily the worst thing because you can tailor some of your defensive characteristics to stopping him. But Patricio Campos, 12 goals. That's one more than maybe one of the best players in the country.
Mr. Alt.
In Palmer Alt. 4 assists, 28 points, 42 shots. That's ridiculous. So you cannot let him get turned on frame. And then him and Andrew Pavlisko are kind of the guys manning most of the points. He has 18 points, 6 goals, 6 assists. But in terms of a D3 opponent, this is as good of one as you're going to get. 2 losses on the year. Not too familiar names that Indiana or even D1 soccer fans would be well known. The first ever meeting between these two matchups, but I think it's interesting to go back to some of the changes that Todd Yeagley might look at making. We saw Ben Doe start against Kentucky, hasn't always been in the back line. Charlie Hoyer's now back healthy. He got a start against Kentucky and had an assist in that match. And then we saw extended time from Nolan Kinsella, Drew Gaydosh. Interesting, little bit. Yeagley opted with a deeper lineup against the Wildcats, which, probably part of that was favoring the defensive-minded acumen of some of those substitutes who came on late in that match. But still, interested to see he's going to the bench a little bit more than he did during the middle of the season when the Hoosiers were struggling.
He's finally flexing some of that depth that when we've talked to him early in the season after games, he's always hammering on, we got so much depth on this team. And when we get some of these guys back healthy, you'll see that. Clay Murador's back healthy, a little more rotation up front. Charlie Hoyer's back healthy. Now we're seeing a lot more rotation in the midfield. Jack Wagner's not playing a full 90 minutes as often anymore, although he did put in a full 90 against the Wildcats. But, yeah, you mentioned the depth and having a number of different guys who can get it done. I think, again, we're probably going to see a lot of that depth against Hanover as well because, being a D3 opponent, despite being a very good D3 opponent, 10-2-2 on the season, you want to get as many guys minutes as possible, especially as you get late into the season. You have no idea who could potentially be that guy to get you over the line and win a must-win Big Ten match, or if we're talking national tournament, move you on to the next round. So you just never know. You want to make sure everybody is up to match fitness and available and ready to make an impact whenever necessary. Yeah, but this game for the Hoosiers, you kind of gotta lock in and say, hey, this is a team we need to beat.
Yep.
This is a game we have to win, but it's not necessarily a get-right game in the sense where you might not be doing what Hanover's been doing and putting 9 goals on the score sheet. But this is a game that you do absolutely have to win and get as many different people involved and put in a good performance as you can. Hanover, by the way, will be in Bloomington tomorrow night. That's a Friday for a 7 p.m. kickoff in Bill Armstrong Stadium. So looking forward to seeing how the Hoosiers come out there, because there is a pretty, I don't want to say tough, but, it's the Big Ten. There's an important stretch of Big Ten games coming up next, Nick.
Yeah, so the Hanover match, you could never write in a result. You have to play 90 minutes. You're going to assume that the Hoosiers are going to take care of business, and whether that is a truly separation in terms of one of the better teams in D1 and a competitive D3 team, or if Hanover shows that they're actually very, very good and the Hoosiers have to work a little bit harder. But more importantly, if you can continue to show what you showed in the second half of Ohio State, the second half of Kentucky, to where you look comfortable, the back line's in sync, you're connected at all 3 phases, defense, midfield, and attackers. You get the ball on Paul Result's feet as much as possible. That's what you want to see if you're Todd Yeagley. Yes, result has to be what the result is, but more importantly, how you play, because you talked about it. 4 Big Ten matches, and we think you're 5 points behind. You do play the top-ranked Maryland. You play Rutgers, who is in front of you in the standings. You also play Wisconsin and Northwestern, who are at the tail end of the Big Ten. So you kind of have 2 and 2 in terms of where the teams are. You got to win 3 of those matches at the very least to probably win the Big Ten, and you really need one of those wins to be against Maryland. And that's the standard for this program. Have at least co-Big Ten championships the last 2 years. That's where Todd Yeagley wants his teams to be. He would love to be able to host a round or 2 in the NCAA tournament. That's
home field advantage.
Home field advantage is a huge thing, especially at the Bill, where we've seen it get rocking this season. Played a big part in those early, very competitive non-conference matchups, and you expect it to be a big part of those high-intensity Rutgers match. Maryland is on the road, so that also plays a factor. But this is it. You have 5 matches left, 4 after Hanover tomorrow. You got to give it your all. You're going to do everything you can to try and move up slowly but surely in a deadlocked Big Ten. Always very competitive this year, especially so. Anybody could win this, depending on how you play against those top teams. And it's noteworthy as well. Maryland has to play Washington. So, however that swings has a ton of effect on who comes out on top. But yeah, this is the end game now. This is where you make your money. This is where Yagtober needs to come into effect. It's October 16th. He's got 2 good wins right in a row, and he plays Friday and then Tuesday. So this is where you got to start to grit your teeth, show what kind of team you are this late in the year.
Todd Yeagley loves to make his money in October. Yagtober, as you mentioned, is in full swing. And you mentioned Maryland. Obviously, all these games, especially in the Big Ten, are must-win as you go further down the line. If you can go into Maryland and get 3 points, that is not only huge for the Big Ten standings, but massive for this team's confidence.
Yes.
Especially, you don't know where you might necessarily be playing in a national tournament game in the opening rounds, and let's say you do make it to the College Cup, then you got to go on the road again to a neutral site, but again, you're not playing at the Bill, which has been a big advantage for Indiana this year. Only 1 loss at home this season. and the draw in the opening game to Clemson.
And that loss was a last-second penalty miss.
Exactly. You were a penalty away from rescuing a point against Michigan. I think with this Maryland and Washington having to play each other, maybe you're looking back at Washington and kind of saying, really wish we could do that one over. Not a very good performance at all in Seattle, a 3-0 loss. Washington by far was the better team in that one. But for Indiana, yes, you at a minimum, you got to win 3 of those conference games, potentially all of them, to win the regular season title. But the focus is on Hanover right now, and you got to get 3 points from that. As you mentioned, Nick, you can't just write in any result. There's no team in college soccer that you can say convincingly will be, a massive win or whatever, especially in Division I. This is one of the better teams in D3 right now. So why don't we get into score predictions for a important confidence-boosting game against a very good D3 opponent. Do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, all right. So Hanover D3 school, good D3 school, and they have scoring potential. I think the Hoosiers give up a goal. I do, but I think they just have one defensive lapse. And I think from there, it's going to be pretty smooth sailing. I don't know when that goal will be. I assume the Hoosiers get on the board first. I'm guessing Paul Moralt gets at least 2 this match. Other than that, you maybe see, I think, Charlie Hoyer. Be a good time for him to get on the score sheet.
I like that shout.
And then I think Clay Mirador does as well. So that puts it at 4-1. And then you add on another unexpected goal, maybe from a defensive position. We've seen Barger do it a couple times. So I'm going to say 5-1 victory, and it could very well be more based on how the Hoosiers play. But that's what I like. A couple goals from Alt, 1 from Barger, 1 from Hoyer. And I think that'll let the Hoosiers handle Hanover and then look ahead to Big Ten play.
Convincing, confident prediction there from Nick Abel. I'm going to go similar, not as many goals. I also think that Hanover does get on the score sheet. Again, I'm not necessarily sure when that will be. My guess is it will be after Indiana. IU opens the scoring. You bring up Charlie Hoyer. I think he's really the X factor in this game. Whether or not he gets on the score sheet or not, he's been so important in the midfield. He's been assisting goals. He got an assist against Kentucky, an assist against Ohio State. So I'm going to say he picks up an assist at least. He gets at least a point. I think Paul Moralt, of course, how can he not?
Right.
Grabs at least one himself. I'm going to go 3-1 Indiana with goals from Paul Moralt. I think it's time. It's almost time we see Collins Oduro get back on the score sheet.
Isn't it? It does feel like it.
And why don't we go with? We'll go with another attacker. We'll go with Michael Nessie.
Okay.
Gets on the score sheet. So a 3-1 win for Indiana, an important win where a lot of guys see a lot of minutes. Who knows? Maybe that potential change in goalkeeper we talked about might influence Hanover's goal scoring. Maybe it's some rotation in the back line. Who knows? But it seems to be a pretty convincing prediction from the two of us.
I think so.
Again, that's Hanover College in Bloomington tomorrow on Friday. That's October 17th at 7 p.m. Kickoff in Bill Armstrong Stadium. And that's going to do it here for us on the Quest for 9 podcast. We will be back here next week to discuss Hanover and the upcoming match next Tuesday as well against Wisconsin, a very important Big Ten matchup. And again, yeah, that's going to do it. That's, yeah. I've been Peter Miller, your host for today. He is Mr. Nick Abel, and we will see you on the next one.